In the year 323 BCE, as Alexander the Great lay dying in Babylon at the age of 32, his generals gathered around his deathbed. When asked to whom he would leave his vast empire, stretching from Macedonia to the edges of India, Alexander reportedly whispered, "To the strongest." With these words, he unwittingly triggered decades of war among his successors. Yet beyond the obvious power vacuum created by his death lies a more profound question: how had this young Macedonian king conquered much of the known world in just 13 years? The answer reveals timeless principles of leadership that transcend centuries, principles that the most enduring rulers throughout history have understood, yet many modern leaders still fail to grasp. As the Persian Empire fell to Alexander's armies in 330 BCE, the young conqueror made a decision that defied conventional wisdom. Rather than imposing Greek customs on his new subjects, he adopted elements of Persian dress and court ceremonies, encouraged marriages between Macedonians and Persians, and incorporated Persian soldiers into his army. His veterans grumbled, but Alexander understood something fundamental: true power comes not from domination alone but from integration and legitimacy. 2 millennia later, Genghis Khan would employ similar principles while building the largest contiguous land empire in history. Born Temujin around 1162 CE into a fractured tribal landscape, the future Great Khan rose from poverty and exile to unite the nomadic peoples of the Mongolian steppe. By 1206, he had united the warring tribes into a single nation. By his death in 1227, the Mongol Empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea. The common narrative of Genghis Khan as merely a brutal conqueror misses the innovations that sustained his power. He abolished the traditional tribal system, reorganizing his forces into units that mixed people from different tribes, breaking old loyalties and creating new ones centered on him. He instituted a meritocracy where advancement depended on skill rather than birth. Perhaps most remarkably, he granted religious freedom throughout his vast domains at a time when such tolerance was virtually unknown. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. These words, attributed to Confucius nearly 2 millennia before the Mongol Empire, capture another principle mastered by history's most effective rulers: the power of demonstrated competence. Emperor Trajan, who ruled Rome from 98 to 117 CE, personified this principle. Unlike many emperors who commanded from a distance, Trajan marched with his legions, shared their hardships, and led from the front. During his Dacian wars, 101 to 102 and 105 to 106 CE, he was frequently seen at the vanguard, earning the respect of common soldiers. His conquest of Dacia, modern Romania, brought enormous wealth to Rome through gold mines, yet he did not hoard this treasure for personal luxury. Instead, he launched an unprecedented program of public works, including the Forum of Trajan, public baths, and the famous Trajan's Column that still stands in Rome today. The column itself reveals another trait of effective leadership: the strategic use of narrative. Rising 38 meters high and covered with a spiral relief depicting the Dacian Wars, it told a carefully crafted story of Roman triumph while immortalizing Trajan's achievements. The emperor understood that power rests not just on military might but on how successfully one controls the narrative surrounding it. Queen Hatshepsut of Egypt, who ruled from approximately 1478 to 1458 BCE, faced an even greater narrative challenge. As a woman in a position traditionally held by men, she had to establish her legitimacy in innovative ways. Her solution was masterful: she had herself depicted in royal statuary wearing the traditional false beard of pharaohs while also emphasizing her divine right to rule as the daughter of the god Amun. Her monuments proclaimed her accomplishments in trade, architecture, and maintaining peace. The magnificent temple at Deir el-Bahari stands as testament to her understanding that monumental architecture serves not merely aesthetic purposes but political ones, creating physical manifestations of power that outlast the ruler's lifetime. This insight into the permanence of institutions versus the transience of individual rule distinguishes history's most successful sovereigns. The Byzantine Emperor Justinian I, reigned 527 to 565 CE, exemplified this understanding. While reconquering much of the former Western Roman Empire through his brilliant general Belisarius, Justinian's most enduring achievement was the codification of Roman law in the Corpus Juris Civilis, completed in 534 CE. This comprehensive legal code would influence legal systems throughout Europe for centuries after his death and forms the foundation of civil law in many countries today. His contemporary in the East, Emperor Wu of Liang China, reigned 502 to 549 CE, displayed similar foresight. Though a devout Buddhist who reportedly took monastic vows multiple times, Emperor Wu recognized that effective governance required practical institutions. He established civil service examinations based on Confucian classics that would evolve into the imperial examination system, a meritocratic bureaucracy that would help sustain Chinese governance for over a millennium. The tension between centralized authority and delegated power presents another challenge that immortal rulers navigated with remarkable skill. Cyrus the Great, founder of the Achaemenid Persian Empire in 550 BCE, conquered vast territories spanning from the Indus Valley to the Mediterranean. Rather than micromanaging this enormous domain, he instituted a system of provincial governors, satraps, with substantial autonomy, connected by royal roads and an efficient postal service. Local populations largely retained their customs, religions, and some degree of self-governance as long as they remained loyal and paid their taxes. This balance between imperial control and local autonomy became a model for later empires, including Alexander's. The Inca ruler Pachacuti, who transformed a small city-state into an empire covering much of western South America between 1438 and 1471 CE, developed a different solution to the same problem. His empire lacked writing and horses, yet maintained control over a vast mountainous territory through an ingenious system of roads, relay runners, chasquis, and quipu, knotted cords that recorded numerical information for administrative purposes. Provinces were integrated through strategic marriages, obligatory service in Cusco, the capital, and a policy of relocating loyal populations to newly conquered areas. Though radically different from Persian satrapy, both systems solved the fundamental problem of maintaining central authority over extensive territory. Yet no discussion of immortal rulership would be complete without addressing its most difficult aspect, succession. Augustus, Rome's first emperor, reigned 27 BCE to 14 CE, transformed a republic torn by civil wars into a stable empire that would last for centuries in the West and millennia in the East, as Byzantium. His genius lay not merely in accumulating power but in disguising it, maintaining republican forms while establishing de facto monarchy. More importantly, he created a system for peaceful transition of power, adopting and grooming his successor, Tiberius, for years before his death. Contrast this with the succession crisis following Charlemagne's death in 814 CE. Despite establishing what would briefly become the largest European empire since Rome, the Frankish ruler failed to create durable institutions to maintain unity after his death. Within a generation, the Carolingian Empire was divided among his grandsons through the Treaty of Verdun in 843, creating the precursors of modern France and Germany. This pattern repeats throughout history. Empires built on the exceptional abilities of a single ruler often collapse rapidly after their death, while those that establish robust institutions and clear succession protocols endure. The Ottoman Empire's remarkable longevity, 1299 to 1922, owed much to its systematic approach to succession, including the devshirme system that trained talented young men from conquered territories for administrative service regardless of their origins. However, even the most brilliant institutional design cannot compensate for a failure to adapt to changing circumstances. The Ming dynasty of China, 1368 to 1644, began with remarkable vigor under the Hongwu emperor who expelled the Mongols and established a native Chinese dynasty. Yet over generations, the Ming court grew increasingly isolated and rigid. When faced with new threats from northern nomads and European maritime powers in the 16th and early 17th centuries, the dynasty could not adapt quickly enough. The last Ming emperor hanged himself as rebels entered Beijing in 1644. The ability to recognize and respond to changing environments separates merely successful rulers from truly transformative ones. Peter the Great of Russia, reigned 1682 to 1725, observed firsthand the technological and administrative advantages of Western European powers during his grand embassy travels in 1697 to 98. Upon his return, he launched sweeping reforms, building a modern navy, reorganizing the military, reforming government, and even ordering his nobles to cut their beards and adopt Western dress. His new capital at St. Petersburg, constructed on swampland at enormous human cost, symbolized his determination to transform Russia into a European power. The most profound wisdom of immortal rulers may be their recognition that power is never absolute but always relational. Queen Elizabeth I of England, reigned 1558 to 1603, inherited a kingdom divided by religious conflict, threatened by powerful continental monarchies, and challenged by questions about whether a woman could effectively rule. Without a standing army or extensive bureaucracy, she maintained power through political acumen, carefully crafted public image, and strategic balancing of factions. Her famous speech at Tilbury in 1588, as the Spanish Armada threatened invasion, "I know I have the body of a weak and feeble woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king, and a king of England too," masterfully addressed concerns about female rule while rallying national sentiment. Elizabeth's contemporary, Emperor Akbar of Mughal India, reigned 1556 to 1605, demonstrated similar political sophistication in a vastly different context. Taking the throne at just 13, he inherited an unstable realm where Muslims ruled a Hindu majority. Rather than imposing religious conformity, Akbar developed a policy of Sulaykul, universal peace, that abolished special taxes on non-Muslims and incorporated Hindus into the highest levels of government. He further cemented alliances through strategic marriages with Rajput Hindu princesses. By the end of his reign, the Mughal Empire controlled most of northern India and parts of Afghanistan, creating a relatively stable multi-ethnic, multi-religious state. Both Elizabeth and Akbar understood that legitimacy derives not just from formal authority but from the consent, or at least acceptance, of the governed. Their approach stands in stark contrast to Philip II of Spain, reigned 1556 to 1598, whose rigid enforcement of Catholic orthodoxy in the Netherlands provoked a revolt that ultimately led to Dutch independence, weakening Spanish power despite Philip's vastly greater resources. Napoleon Bonaparte, rising to power in post-revolutionary France, initially demonstrated remarkable understanding of these principles. After crowning himself emperor in 1804, he instituted the Civil Code, Napoleonic Code, that rationalized French law, enshrined property rights, and outlawed privileges based on birth. He promoted men of talent regardless of their origins and created a new nobility based on merit rather than heredity. These reforms cemented his domestic support while his military victories built national pride. Yet Napoleon's later career reveals the blindness that often accompanies great power. His invasion of Russia in 1812 with over 650,000 troops, of whom fewer than 30,000 returned, demonstrates how even brilliant leaders can lose touch with strategic reality. His famous statement that "power is my mistress" reveals a shift from seeing power as instrumental, a means to national and personal glory, to seeing it as an end in itself. This transformation illustrates what may be the most crucial understanding shared by truly great rulers, the recognition that they serve something larger than themselves. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor from 161 to 180 CE and Stoic philosopher, captured this sentiment in his Meditations: "That which is not good for the beehive cannot be good for the bee." Despite being an absolute ruler, he understood himself as servant to Rome and to universal principles of justice and reason. Frederick II, the Great, of Prussia, reigned 1740 to 1786, expressed a similar sentiment when he called himself the first servant of the state. Though an absolute monarch who significantly expanded Prussian territory through military conquests like the Silesian Wars, Frederick also reformed Prussian law, promoted religious tolerance, patronized the arts and education, and modernized the bureaucracy. His personal austerity contrasted sharply with the lavish expenditure of contemporaries like Louis XV of France, reflecting his conception of rulership as public service rather than personal privilege. What these immortal rulers understood, and what many modern leaders miss, is that genuine power flows from alignment between the ruler's interests and those of the state and society. When that alignment fails, no amount of force can maintain authority indefinitely. The Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, reigned 1520 to 1566, exemplified this understanding. Under his rule, the Ottoman Empire reached its zenith, controlling vast territories across 3 continents. Yet Suleiman's most lasting achievement was not military conquest but legal reform, earning him the title Kanuni, lawgiver, among his Turkish subjects. He reformed the tax system, simplified administrative procedures, and standardized criminal law. These measures improved ordinary subjects' lives while strengthening state capacity, a virtuous cycle that allowed the Ottoman system to endure centuries after his death. In our modern world, where leadership often seems increasingly disconnected from the lived experiences of ordinary people, these historical examples offer crucial lessons. The most successful rulers in history, those whose achievements truly earned them the epithet great, understood several fundamental principles. First, legitimacy matters more than raw power. Force can compel temporary compliance but not lasting loyalty. Effective rulers establish legitimacy through demonstrated competence, respect for local customs, religious and cultural inclusion, and alignment with prevailing values. Second, institutions outlast individuals. The most enduring legacy comes not from personal glory but from creating systems that continue to function after the ruler's death. Laws, bureaucracies, infrastructure, educational systems, and succession protocols all serve this purpose. Third, adaptation ensures survival. Environments change, technologies advance, social values evolve, and external threats transform. Rulers who recognize these shifts and respond appropriately preserve their power. Those who cling to outdated models lose it. Fourth, narrative shapes reality. Control over how events are interpreted and remembered often proves as important as the events themselves. The most effective rulers craft compelling narratives about their rule, their people, and their place in history. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, power serves purpose. When rulers understand themselves as serving something greater, whether divine law, national glory, human progress, or simply the welfare of their people, they make decisions that balance short-term expediency against long-term flourishing. When they instead view power as an end in itself, corruption, abuse, and eventually downfall inevitably follow. As we face unprecedented global challenges in the 21st century, from climate change to technological disruption to growing inequality, these lessons from history's immortal rulers offer critical guidance. For in the end, what makes certain rulers immortal is not their conquest of death, but their understanding of what truly endures, not personal power, but the institutions, values, and human flourishing they help to create.